But before we dive in, wanted to just do a quick overview and context setting of the solution here. So, thinking way back when Toolio got started, our team is heavy on retail expertise. To introduce myself, I'm Gigi. I'm one of the account executives here. I specialize in the enterprise and upper mid market space of companies that we work with. I've been at Toolio now for 3 years, nearly 3 years in the fall. And prior to that, I was at TJX myself as an allocator in their planning department. And most of our team has similar backgrounds. Our two founders, Aton and Burke, actually uh, met at Stanford, created an app there, and then sold it to Walmart. And in doing that, they joined the Walmart team and saw that Walmart, even at their massive size and scale, was still using spreadsheets. And we still were at TJX as well. And of course, those spreadsheets led to not only a ton of time wasted, but a lot of inefficiencies in their processes. We see most teams right now, and I talk with hundreds of teams each year around, regardless of their vertical or their size, they're usually cemented in spreadsheet driven systems. They're manually pulling in that data from different systems like an ERP or their e-commerce site for that point of sale information. Maybe they've recently added in a BI or a data warehouse that they're pulling these fields from. But regardless of those innovations in the rest of the tech stack, it's still remaining stuck in Excel for that planning piece. That can lead to issues in inventory inefficiencies like slowing down your turn or missing opportunities to improve that margin. So, having more of a data driven approach here is our goal to allow the team to have more visibility into granular level data that those spreadsheets don't afford that opportunity. So today we'll run through how does Toolio connect back seamlessly to those tried and true retail tech stack components. How does that then flow throughout the Toolio system? So one of the real beneficial factors of Toolio here is that we are an end-to-end solution. So you'll see all of the key planning workflows that your team is managing now across who knows how many. I've heard some crazy numbers of 40, 50 different spreadsheets working across an organization. So how can we condense that into one underlying data set and start to automate and connect the planning workflows there? Of course, the teams will start to see an instant time saving and having those manual processes automated. But as we look towards each individual module, how can we improve things like the turn, which is key these days as we look towards pushing through product? How can we improve margin as we start to think about our top line dollars and where we're spending on the most critical piece of merchandise? Or maybe in the allocation piece, how can we ensure that these products we've poured our heart and soul into creating and sourcing, how do we get them in front of the right customer? So all of these decisions are happening here in Toolio, and we're doing that for a lot of different customers and verticals. So you might notice that here at Toolio, we really cut our teeth in apparel, footwear, accessories, home goods, and sporting goods. So teams like Bombas or Filson, we just recently signed on the Jay McLaughlin team, who are an amazing team to work with. They have several, over 100 stores now where they're managing boutique level experiences for their customers. So regardless of the vertical, the team experience or size or tech stack, we're working with a variety of different customers who I'll say across the board are all very forward thinking teams. So looking to get out of those Excel based workflows and start to automate those processes. I'll touch a little bit further on what those different tech stack components are that we see teams integrating with. But as a larger caveat, we work and play very well with a large set of data sources of truth would be the word. But typically, these are the platforms that we see teams looking towards, and we'd be happy to speak with your team uniquely around what different platforms we may be able to recommend to add on to a system like Toolio. But typically, these are the processes that teams are running through. So you start in planning. At the beginning of the year, you're starting to plan out where is our open to buy going to lay? Where are we putting these dollars? Then you go into producing those products. This is where PLM might come in. We see, WFX, maybe Backbone. This is where the product team is actually designing their different products, or maybe a sourcing team is going out and negotiating for their products there. That all then flows into supply, where we see ERPs coming in. We hear a lot about NetSuite, which we're a certified suite at partner for, or maybe Dynamics. I know D365 is all the rage these days. So an ERP is a must for most teams. Then you come into the selling platforms like Shopify or BigCommerce, their e-commerce sites. And then again, coming back into the analytics. So Toolio, of course, has a ton of analytics built in, but we see teams also layering on Looker, Snowflake, maybe Power BI to help with that further analysis there. But as we dive into the Toolio platform and what we'll run today, these are the key workflows that we cut our teeth in. So as you start to think about where does this fit into all of our other tech stack pieces that we're working with, Toolio is one place for all of those merchandising workflows. So anything from your merchandise planning at your top line piece, which is where you'll do that bird's eye financial planning, coming in and starting to do the open to buy. Where are we going to need to place units to hit those goals? And also a lot of that preseason what if scenario playing. So what if I were to open a new men's category, or if we were to have a promotion in this month, how is that going to affect the top line dollars that we then need to plan to bottoms up? That comes in, that bottoms up piece is filled in with our assortment planning piece. So we have recently combined our assortment planning and demand planning, which was originally item planning, into one module here. So if you've seen a demo maybe over a year ago, this might look pretty different, but really we've combined the two. So now we have assortment planning and demand planning all in one. First, this starts with that rationalization piece. So how can I use all of that historical data that I have pulling in, use the system to cleanse that data, and then help me decide where should these dollars truly be invested in? And then using those top line financial goals that we've set, start to build in those different line items. So we'll talk about how we can build out those line sheets there, whether it's a third party retailer who is going out and sourcing goods, or if it's an in-house product team who then needs to go and design to those plans. And then we'll quickly touch on allocation. This applies to the teams who have true brick and mortar stores. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, Jay McLaughlin, for example, has over 100 different stores that they're allocating to. So how are we helping with those different clusterings? How are we starting to take those decisions made at the point of the initial buy and pull that into the actual allocation strategy? So keep in mind, allocation is available for the teams with true brick and mortar stores, but we do see teams opting into one or two or all three of these. So pick and choose what matters most to your team, but we'll jump into a quick demo. As I mentioned, please send any questions in the chat. And if I happen to miss them, of course, I'll follow back up over email, and this recording will be sent back out to you. But all right, let's dive right into the fun part here, a quick demo of Toolio. And any additional questions, I'll say this is going to be very high level, but I'm happy to connect you with one of our more specialized product solutions consultants for deeper, more specific questions to your processes. But overall, some typical workflows we see our customers utilizing across the board. First and foremost, I think the dashboards are something I would have dreamed about as an allocator back in the day. So everything is cloud-based here. All of your data is stored in the cloud. So we find a lot of teams connecting back to their ERP for example, NetSuite. We have a direct suite app that we're constantly each day updating your data, which would have saved many headaches on a Monday morning. You can come in and start to see these quick performance summaries on your dashboard here. So as I mentioned, layering this in with the BI tool, these metrics are specific to planning teams. So you're looking at things like margin or total sales for the week. These are configurable for your team. So whatever matters most, you can come in and start to create your different dashboards for the team here and get a quick taste on performance on a Monday morning, for example. After you've come in and looked through your dashboards at the total level or the product level, for example, you'll probably come into our merchandise planning module. This is where most teams get started and use it as the foundation of the rest of their planning work. So this is where you set those top line financial targets. We set them for the organization in a really simple, easy to use way here. So I know most planners, we love to hate Excel. So it has all the best parts of Excel in it, the copy and pasting, the summaries, the grid-like interface here. But of course, it's much more robust than that. And all of this functionality that you see in the merchandise planning module here are, of course, fluid throughout the module. And I hear that from a lot of teams, that continuity across the modules, across the workflows is key for not only understanding and tracking across your team, but ensuring that decisions are being made cohesively and not in silos that may currently exist in your Excel-based platform. So first and foremost, we have access to 200 plus different metrics here. So gross sales, pricing, inventory, anything your planning mind can dream of, we have available to you. So no longer going in and coding these into your Excel, hoping that you're using the right formula. We have flexible inputs and outputs here as well. So you can look at the formula, start to change around what you want the output of that formula to be quickly and right on the fly, as well as any variance on those metrics. So LY, LLY, plan, percent to build, you get the idea. Tons of flexibility in what data you're looking at and how you're looking at it. So our system in the back end is taking those automatic actualizations that you provided to us and quickly popping out any of these metrics you need to look at. Also, ton of flexibility on the time groupings here. So you might want to look at weekly, monthly, quarterly, even have the ability to do daily if that is important to your team, or different time frames. I always love this for fashion heavy teams that might have collection based drops. So maybe you look at your fall 2023 collection, for example. You might go all the way back to who knows how much historical data you have available to you. So whatever you have available, you can quickly come in and play around with how you aggregate that data. I'll also note that that data is flexible from a hierarchy standpoint as well. So typically right now, it would probably look something like this in your Excel. You blast open to the different levels of your hierarchy. But maybe you're a team that wants to see by different channel. Sorry, those are my filters. I want to go into groupings here and bring in my different channels. So I want to see my clothing, footwear, and accessories departments by channel, which typically most teams might operate more siloed there, where you might just look for the web team and the accessories. Here, you can start to see accessories across all of your different channels, see that true roll up across the team. So this is a great way to get a bird's eye view into how things are performing, and more importantly, what changes do we need to make across the organization to hit our total company goals. So maybe we can start making some of those changes. So typically a team would come in here and start creating scenarios. So think of a scenario as a unique spreadsheet or a unique view that you're using currently. So you'll come in here and probably get started with seeding a scenario. So I'm creating a foundation to work off. Maybe, for example, I'm just looking at total 2025. That's my target. And I want to use the actuals and the plans of this year. So anything that's actualized already and any planned data moving forward. Hear from a ton of teams that you're thinking a year plus out at this point, given the lead time. So the ability to use plan is fantastic here. So let's come in, let's go look at 2025. I put in an up 20% there if you noticed that. So I wanted to raise all of my numbers with that up 20% goal that finance is challenging me to achieve this year. So you'll see that we've taken those actuals and the planned data, bumped them up 20%, respecting their contribution to that curve. And now we can come in and start to make some adjustments. So I just want to look at total footwear. So I'm going to take out that channel. Super easy to manipulate the views as you're working in them. And let's see, I'm going to come in and lock that total number. So I'm going to keep that up 20% I had prior and then start to make my adjustments. As we talked earlier, for example, I'm going to be running a promo in August on my accessories. And I think I'm actually going to be doing 5 million in sales in that time frame instead. But as you can see, it still maintained that 44 million that accessories was slated to do for that year and has instead smoothed out the rest of the prior months to build towards that promotional period that I've inputted. You can see that happening here with anything with that blue caret. So that one simple change I made is now starting to impact all of those additional outputs, my weeks of supply, for example, my return rate is affected here. So you can start to recognize how are things ebbing and flowing based on those changes that I've made. And of course, any of those changes that you've made are also trackable for the rest of the team. So I can come in here and save comments. I can also save this as an individual scenario. So typically we see various different planners across the team creating different scenarios. Looks like somebody also created a February promotional scenario. There's different things happening throughout the year that the team is planning across their individual departments. And then I might come in as a planning manager, for example, and decide which scenarios we're going to go with, and then merge them all into the master scenario. So you're creating these different scenarios ahead of time, playing around with what if we were to do this before you decide on the master. And that becomes your driving force throughout the rest of the module here. So this master that I've now built out will drive the decision making in the additional modules that we're going to run through. So that's a typical workflow. This was done, you can do it pre-season or make those adjustments in season. Regardless of the time frame that you do them, they will then show up in our assortment planning module. So the assortment planning module is, as we mentioned, the bottoms up piece here. I think it's really important to understand that merchandise planning and assortment planning are two separate modules. They don't connect to one another in the way that you would push down those top line plans. They're separate in the way that it forces you to have those reconciliation conversations. And that is a huge part of how we think about the checks and balances between a tops down and bottoms up planning methodology. So first and foremost, you might come in here and start looking at your assortment plan from a gallery view here. I think this is always something that buyers love to see is how can I look visually at my assortment, especially for those fashion heavy companies. So you can come in here and start to play around in this playground here on how am I going to perhaps launch these products, or do I need to change around the retail? I have a lot sitting at 125 here. You can start to look from this visual perspective as well. But I'm going to pop into a summary here and start to look at the individual assortments that I have. So as we just did back in merchandise plan, I will look at that reconciliation section. That's really where you should get started. What are those top line goals I just set for this time frame? So it will pick out those specific weeks and the goals associated with them and show you as you close that gap, how are you rolling up? So for example, I have planned 17,000 units here and I'm rolled up 100 or 11,000, 12,000. So this isn't my best example here. Let me go and see if I can find another one. But in this example, it's saying, hey, you're actually overbought. So this team actually has some cutting to do. But if, for example, we were rolling low on our units, we would need to come in and start building out that assortment. As you're doing that, the system is creating demand plans at that unit level for you. So as you come in, you can start to see this brown windbreaker has a unit plan built out for the forward-looking weeks. I can start to look at, the next 13 weeks, for example. As long as you have units available for that time, the system will predict out those sales and where you need those units to live to optimize those sales there. So automatic demand plans being created out for each individual product here as you go through, noting that, of course, those individual outputs and the inputs to create them are easily adjusted by the end user. So none of the back-end machine learning or AI in our system occurs in a black box. You can start to, of course, always adjust the inputs into those to fit the needs of your team. So all of those different inputs are seen here, like rate of sale models, size curves, return profiles, all easily adjusted if needed. But I think because that demand planning is automated out, it allows for your team to really spend a lot of time in considering the total makeup of the assortment. And that comes into play hugely in our rationalization here. So rationalization is the ability to start to look back at the historic data and then cleanse it out for anomalies, thinking of things like out of stocks or weeks that the product wasn't out on the floor to truly be sold. So we can come in here and pull out that assortment that you're looking to dig into. And we're really working to try to eliminate the long tail of that assortment. So any of these products down here in 12 and 13 choices, for example, that did not contribute to the total sales selection there. So we're looking at analyzing the data, deciding on how many choices should we have to hit those top line goals that we've set, and then we can come in and start rationalizing rather off of that. So taking those top line financial goals, how many units do we need to have or how many choices, and then how deep do those choices need to be to hit those goals? So we can play around with the width and the depth of our assortment to achieve that level of comfort our product team is most comfortable in investing in. So for example, maybe I have, more choices this year than last year that we're looking to invest in. How productive those individual choices need to be to hit those top line goals? And then you would use this analysis to help build out the number of options that you need and what does that assortment truly look like. So that rationalization is super powerful there and something we could spend a ton of time on. But as you start to rationalize that assortment, you can then come in and start to build out the actual lines to fulfill that. So this is that same assortment we were looking at prior. This is where you come in and start to build out any of that newness. So our core products, they're automatically showing up here. They're our tried and true. We have the demand plans built out. We know how they're going to perform. But as you start to build in additional line items there, you might come in and use our compare mode here. So this is where you can pull in historical data to look at and build out those new line items. So this is automatically pulling in from whichever compare time frame you want to look at from your source of truth like NetSuite. And then you can come in and start to, for example, you might want to repeat a product that wasn't intended to be core but performed so well last year. We're going to directly repeat that product. You can see it carried right over into this new assortment and all of that historical data associated with it. Maybe we want to extend a product that is currently living and we want to buy back into, or maybe we want to create a placeholder here. So I see this working really well for teams that are highly seasonal, and the planning team wants to come in months ahead of time and build out a placeholder for what that item should look like to give direction to the product team on what to develop or the buying team on what to source. So this is where you can come in, start to build out what that placeholder needs to be. And then from there, the teams can come in and start to look at their style bank or their PLM, for example, on what products are available to them and where should we actually attribute those back to the system. I've got some terrible Wi-Fi here today, but typically this would connect back to your PLM. So maybe, for example, we see a feed direct from WFX on what products is the product team building out. And maybe I see that fitting well with that seasonal placeholder I created. So we can automatically create that relationship between the two systems and associate this placeholder with that product built out in the PLM to connect the two there. As you're doing that, of course, all of the rationalization is updating and reflecting those edits, so you can start closing that gap. Or if the team is unable to close that gap, or in this case, exceeding that gap, this then encourages that conversation from that top line planning perspective on how we can mirror that with the bottoms up perspective, or where do we need to shift dollars around to achieve these goals. So we've run through what does the top line financial planning piece look like? How does that impact our bottoms up choice level planning? And now we can go into where does that really start to affect allocation? So again, allocation is the true movement of the product from the warehouses to the stores. So this best use case is for teams with brick and mortar locations. And this is the last step of that assortment planning process. So back in assortment planning, you may have noticed that you're able to attribute different store clusters here. And there's a ton of exciting AI and machine learning built into how the system thinks about Where can we start to group like for like stores and start to send similar products to them in that way? And then all of that is executed on here in assortment plan or allocation rather. So this allocation plan is the output of the strategies that we're going to set in a minute, but wanted to show you what you might walk into on a weekly basis on your allocation side. So you can see again at any level of granularity where your allocations are going, what level of units the store currently holds, what they're expecting to see this week. So you can start to anticipate when things are going to land in a store and when they will actually move to the floor as well. So any level of granularity you need to see on the output of those strategies. So this is what the system will execute on based on these strategies we've created. Again, all of these strategies are managed by the end allocator. So while they are super automated off of your decision making throughout the platform, there is still a ton of ability to impact the outputs here. So an allocation strategy can be impacted from a variety of different things. And I will say, if you're using our assortment planning module that we just previewed, it will take a lot of those decisions and carry them directly over. So any of those product attributes, any of the location lists, those demand plans already created, those are flowing in automatically from the assortment planning module, which is super powerful for all of these allocations to be made back at the point of the buy and then simply executing on them in season. However, we do have some teams that only use our allocation module. So these are eligible to be updated within the allocation module on their own. Or, for example, if something has changed since the point of the buy, maybe you were short shipped and need to change your demand type, or maybe size curves have changed, you can also come in and start to update those within the allocation module here. But at any point, you can start to see, based on all of these inputs, for example, using the alpha size curve that I have that dynamically updates weekly on this blue product, I can see where the system is suggesting I send these to. For example, store 1 versus store 6 are going to get different product levels at different times to hit those different presentation profiles or minimum order quantities, for example. It's going to account for how those systems, or those stores rather, cluster in the needs to maintain different things like presentation profiles or capacity restraints. So the system is allocating at the SKU level for the individual store level based on these inputs that you have here that can be carried over from assortment planning or individually delegated across the products here as well. Tons of other fun functionality there where you might either hold back or push out all inventory based on where the product's sitting in its life. So really, we see allocation analysts coming in, setting up these strategies for any new products that they have, rerunning them if they have any adjustments to make, or managing day-to-day impacts that might happen as a product is starting to phase out, like pushing out any remaining units, for example. But the majority of this allocation process is highly automated based off of those decisions you made back at the point of the buy, which again highlights how crucial it is to have an end-to-end planning solution here to ensure that your finance team and those top line planners are all connected back in the merchandise planning module. Your bottoms up planners are working directly to hit those targets in your assortment planning module, and your allocators are using all of those decisions made back at the point of the buy, which were made at the point of the financial plans, to then actually execute on those decisions. So that is a super quick and speedy overview of Toolio in our 3 modules here. I will say we have an exciting roadmap as well, where we're starting to think about things like markdown management or multi-echelon assortment or allocations rather. So all of those needs that your teams are starting to see, it is our goal to cover those full end-to-end workflows, and we'd be happy to discuss further the unique needs of your team. So we will be sending out this recording, but of course, please reach out with any additional questions. And it was great talking to you all. I know I ran a little bit over today. So any questions that you have, please do send them over and we'll send this